news! The pandemic has created a new class of super rich billionaires. But is it working for them? Are they happy? Please let them be happy. You 4.5 million miracles, I hope you're happy on your quest for personal realisation and actualisation. And if you're in the UK between January and May, come see me for reals in the flesh. And what flesh it is, by Jove. Now, who is unhappy potentially is a class of newly minted super billionaires who have accrued record wealth in the pandemic, the greatest wealth transfer in history. To give us a rare insight into the minds of these privileged elites, we are reading an article by a renowned psychotherapist who's treated some of these billionaires. How can we even get a handle on what it would be like to live in the rarefied air of these princelings and duchesses? Let's see what reality is like for them. Because, you know, under the myth of our time, ascension into the realm of the elite would be a solution to all our problems. So how are they coping with that reality? Does it even work? Was it worth all the trouble, Jeff? For a cock rocket? Clay Cockrell, a psychotherapist, writes, over the years, I've developed a great deal of empathy for those who have far too much. Have you? You haven't, have you? You might feel enraged because you feel like that there's deprivation, injustice, inequality, unfairness, and you're right. There is. This isn't about this. This ain't dissuading you from your feelings of righteousness and rageful indignation. This is about exploring the reality of these billionaires so as we can understand it better. What could possibly be challenging about being a billionaire, you might ask? Well, what would it be like if you couldn't trust those close to you? Or if you looked at any new person in your life with deep suspicion? I hear this from my clients all the time. What do they want from me? Or how are they going to manipulate me? Or they are probably only friends with me because of my money. I've known some billionaires, as a matter of fact, and they are a little bit like that. And I studied them when I was around them, and I noticed a kind of fragility along with the incredible power. I noticed too, in my own experiences of wealth and privilege and success, the inability, the lack of efficacy of material pleasures for remedying a sense of loss. Now, I know it ain't easy to hear stuff like that if you think, hold a minute, I can't bloody well pay my bills. You're right. But it's interesting that inequality don't even work for the people on the fruitful side of the arrangement. Then there are the struggles with purpose, the depression that sets in when you feel like you have no reason to get out of bed. Why bother going to work when the business you have built or inherited runs itself without you now? If all your necessities and much more were covered for the rest of your life, you might struggle with a lack of meaning and ambition too. If you have no purpose, no meaning in your life because your needs are met, even on the level of just being able to feed yourself, clothe yourself and keep yourself warm, suddenly the philosophical questions of life become more important. We're starting to experience this now. The culture war, the tribal tensions, a culture tearing itself apart as it struggles to find what it means when Christendom is over, when progressivism is over. What are we now? The billionaire is the epitome of the materialist class. What happens if you literally accrue more than you will ever need? What if you accrue so much it has a negative impact on ordinary people, on the planet itself? Does it even work for you? Of course it doesn't, because you are heading in the wrong direction. So even though it's a minor note in the symphony of change that we need to conduct, it's a note worth registering. This works for no one. I've said before that if you see someone in a Ferrari, you should approach them like, oh my God, are you okay? Is everything all right? Come here. Yes, leave me alone. Get off me. That if you need a lot of privilege, and God knows I have privilege of my own, then it's an indication that there's a lack elsewhere in your life. My clients are often bored with life, and too many times this leads them to chase the next high, chemically or otherwise, to fill that void. Most of the people I see are much more willing to talk about their sex lives or substance misuse problems than their bank accounts. Money is seen as dirty and secret. Money is awkward to talk about. Money is wrapped up in guilt, shame and fear. There is a perception that money can immunise you against mental health problems, when actually I believe that wealth can make you and the people closest to you much more susceptible to them. It's an indication of how strongly we've been conditioned that it's difficult even to talk about this issue without me being aware of you feeling like, yeah, well, bloody hell, I'd rather have that problem. I recognise that. But we're all familiar with the anecdotal examples of people winning lotteries, lottos, football pools and deteriorating because wealth in itself has no meaning. We are all aware too of the native and indigenous tales that regard the accumulation of material products as a kind of disorder. We live in a sick society where we've prioritized materialism over idealism. We have no values or principles. We have people racing to the conclusion of an argument that has no values, no deep truth in it. We have people spending their whole lives acquiring fortunes that they're never going to use, don't need, that are meaningless, that can never fulfill them. Too many of my clients want to indulge their children so they never have to suffer what I had to suffer while growing up. But the result is they prevent their children from experiencing the very things that made them successful: sacrifice, hard work, overcoming failure, developing resilience. An overindulged child develops into an entitled adult who has low self-confidence, low self-esteem, and a complete lack of grit. These very wealthy children start out by going to elite boarding schools and move on to elite universities, developing a language and culture among their own kind. Rarely do they create friendships with non-wealthy people. This can lead to feelings of isolation and being trapped inside a very small bubble. It's also an indication that we don't live in one Britain or one America or one anywhere. There are trammeled and particular lines of privilege where people live in elite paddocks, granted immunity from the ordinary everyday experience. And now we have more intercommunication. We're aware of that. We're aware in this time of crisis and great personal and social, even global reevaluation, that there's this entire culture that is being exempted from the problems of the pandemic and in fact has hugely benefited from it. I suppose the reason for looking at this issue is to have another bullet in the armory against this unnecessary inequality, these failed systems, these broken ideologies. There are a few people in the world to whom they can actually relate, which of course leads to a lack of empathy. The next time you watch Succession, see how the Roys interact with their staff and others outside their circle. Notice the awkwardness and lack of human connection and how dreadfully they treat each other. It's fascinating and frightening. When one leads a life without consequences, for being rude to a waiter or cruel to a sibling, for example, there really is no reason to not do these things. After a while, it becomes normalised and accepted. Living a life without rules isn't good for anyone. A materialistic life as well is a commitment to the idea that there is no deeper ulterior meaning. The only thing that matters is the acquisition of objects, accruing more material, accruing more power, accruing more resources. If that becomes your ideology, because ultimately, fundamentally, it isn't true, because there is a realm beyond the reach of the senses that we are nevertheless impacted by, our consciousness itself, in my opinion, resourced from this deep well, you are living in an illusion. You are recommitting to the illusion with every object you purchase. You are living in a nihilistic space, a place desiccated of the richness of meaning, a dry, barren landscape papered over with privilege. So is wealth psychopathic? Given that wealth doesn't help you, doesn't heal you, makes matters worse for the world and potentially for the individuals themselves, is it an example of psychosis? In Jacobin, Luke Savage writes, in one estimate by journalist John Ronson, instances of psychopathy are 4 times higher among CEOs than among the general population. The vast majority of ultra-rich people, though, aren't literally psychopaths, even if many regularly do things that cause immense harm, stress and suffering to other people. It's more that it's a psychopathic ideology, a psychopathic system. Taking more than you need is, even as you announce it in the algebra of language, a form of psychopathy. Being extremely rich is thus, at least for some, a constant psychological tug of war. It's not that the wealthy are oppressed by capitalism, but rather that they are captive to it like everybody else. And as the biggest beneficiaries of our hierarchical economic system, they are often given a bird's eye view of its depredations. One of the things I've been granted by my own limited experiences of fame and fortune is that it is dumb, empty, inane. I have announced my apostasy many times. Celebrity can't fulfill you. It's a peculiar religion. Wealth, privilege, these are odd ideologies and they embed themselves in you. It's so difficult to free yourself from the toxicity of it once you've experienced it. I'm not asking for sympathy. Of course I'm not. I'm describing a situation. Unless you're a psychopath, being exorbitantly wealthy often necessarily involves painful contortions of the soul. Insofar as it's possible to generalise about a vague and contested concept like human nature, there is something profoundly unnatural about exploiting and dominating other people, just as it's deeply inhuman and antisocial to have the majority of your relationships be defined by proximity to money. It goes without saying that people with real problems will always be more deserving of sympathy than those that fly around in private jets, reside in gaudy mansion houses, or sit atop the gilded managerial hierarchies of large corporations. Being underpaid and exploited is a much more common experience than being wealthy, and the psychological toll it takes inarguably represents a greater injustice than whatever pathologies a handful of yacht owners are currently litigating with the help of well-paid therapists. Interesting analysis, difficult to argue with, but nonetheless a window into the ineptitude of these systems to advance the experience of even those that are winning at the game, albeit by inherited wealth in the vast majority of cases. Surely the answer then is to examine these systems and particularly dismantle the aspects of our system that not only grant further opportunity to people in positions of elite privilege, but prevent change from happening. It's not a level playing field. We're not talking about, well, this is just, social Darwinism. What we're talking about is rigged systems that continually advance the interests of the powerful, even if it's not making them any happier, which for me demonstrates that the whole thing is bloody pointless. But that's just what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, turn on the old ding-a-ling bell in your mind so you know whenever I'm making content. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at this cheeky little guy. And if you want to meditate and enrich your spirit, given it's the only thing you actually have, subscribe to my Awakening side channel and learn some techniques on there. Please subscribe also to my mailing list. It's just one click away. And if you're in the UK between January and May 2022, come see me live. Stay free.